Start the recording. All right, with no other questions, let's jump into our opening statements. Starting off will be Delegate Lee Carter.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Lee Carter. I'm proud to have represented the people of the 50th District for the last 4 years. That's the city of Manassas and parts of Western Prince William County. And I don't come from a normal background for a politician. I'm not an attorney. I'm not wealthy. I'm an enlisted Marine Corps veteran and an electronics repairman by trade. And I got involved in Virginia politics because I got hurt at work in the summer of 2015. It was that experience dealing with the Workers' Compensation Commission that made me realize something had to change. I started going to folks that worked around the General Assembly and asking them what the plan was to fix workers' comp. Nobody had a plan and nobody seemed really interested in making one. So I said, all right, the first step in the plan begins with me running for office. So I took on a fight that the Democratic Party said was impossible. I challenged Jackson Miller, an 11-year incumbent, a member of Republican Party leadership, in a district that was gerrymandered specifically for him. And by building a multiracial working class coalition, we were able to reach thousands of first-time voters and irregular voters and get them to show up for a General Assembly race that they had never voted in before. And by doing that, we flipped this seat from one that was held by an arch conservative to one that is now a bastion of progressive working class politics. I'm the only Democrat who has ever carried this seat since its creation, and I have provided tip of the spear leadership on issue after issue after issue, leading the way on issues like abolishing the death penalty, legalizing cannabis, and fighting to make the Commonwealth of Virginia a place where wealth is common so that we are no longer the worst state in America for working people. And I hope that you will see fit to continue sending me to Richmond for the next 2 years so that I can keep fighting to make sure that we build on the progress that we have made in the last 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Ms. Michele Maldonado. You're on mute, Ms. Maldonado.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can. There's a little bit of feedback, though.
I hear that.
I believe that feedback is coming from Ms. Sorto. So if you could please mute your microphone.
There we go.
Thank you so very much. Maybe we'll start my time now. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for that technical assistance, Delegate Carter. Hello, Candidate Zarita. So glad to be here with you all. I am Michele Maldonado, and I'm running for the seat here in District 50. And I'm here for a number of reasons, standing on the shoulders of many before me. But the most important one was a 5th grade teacher who reached out to me and told me and shared with me a view of the world that was larger and bigger than I had. And in that vision, she shared with me that I could be and do anything that I wanted. And this is the power of our teachers. And I come from a family who is a family of first and a family of servants. My father was a math teacher. My mother worked for the Department of Education. And my grandmother was the first principal in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where I'm originally from. My grandfather was an instructor for the Tuskegee Airmen. And my uncle, my great uncle, was in fact a Tuskegee Airman. So I share this to say that I come from a family of service and a family of first, but I also come from a family where we experienced food insecurity, housing insecurity. And when that teacher intersected with me in 5th grade, I was actually living in a camping trailer, not a mobile home, not a single family home, not an apartment, but I was in a camping trailer in a mobile home park. And over my lifetime, I have worked hard because I knew that there was everything in the world that was open to me with the right supports. Not everybody has the same access. Not everybody has the same supports. I want to bring the supports to our education, to our economy, to our healthcare, to our environment and infrastructure as well. And with that, there's got to be an equity lens so that everybody in every single component has a fair shot, a fair opportunity. Access isn't enough. If people don't know about it, if people don't know how to access it, saying something is affordable and accessible isn't enough. So for me, I bring all my skills here. I want to represent us. I want to be here on one community, one commonwealth.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Helen Zarita.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. My name is Helen Zarita, and I'm a candidate for the 50th District. I'm here today not for myself, but for the constituents that I've been serving for the last 5 years. I want to bring to them change and change throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that change was something that I've already started. I've been bringing resources, especially now through COVID-19. And I want to go ahead and I want to start building that momentum together with the people that I've already started with. And when I mean change, I don't just mean the change that I want to bring is for healthcare accessibility, bringing food back to the tables of families, and that is something that I've already started. Affordable health care, bringing jobs back into the Commonwealth, getting women back to work, or keeping the women's workforce going without them having to step back. Affordable health care, everything that I'm going to talk about today has to be affordable. Affordable health care, bringing jobs back into the Commonwealth, women's rights, bringing us together. We've already started this force, and I just want to continue on and bringing those services back into bringing us out of COVID-19. And also, most recently, President Biden talked about this big infrastructure program, and I want to see that come to Prince William County. I want to see that to keep going here in the Commonwealth. There's a lot of subjects to be touched on that. There's a lot of things, but my personal reason for being here today is because people have asked me to bring the change that I've already started bringing, but to throw on that change and take it to Richmond and bring that relief back to our constituents, not only here in the 50th District, but
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Thank you, Ms. Zarita.
All right. Thank you to all of our candidates for your opening statements. We will now move into our questions. With our first question, we will start off with Delegate Carter. First question, with Amazon's decision to make their second headquarters in Northern Virginia, more people are likely to come to Manassas to live. Manassas has been seeing substantial population growth. What is your plan to make sure that housing is affordable for our low and middle income residents?
Thank you so much for this question. I was actually a dissenter on the Amazon deal. I opposed it for precisely this reason. The way that we've been doing economic development is spending tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in the case of Amazon, nearly $2 billion, giving incentives to private corporations to have them pretty please come and give us some jobs. But the problem in Northern Virginia in particular is primarily one of affordability, not one of joblessness. And so I argued that instead of spending $1.8 billion on tax breaks and cash payments and infrastructure upgrades for Amazon, we should take that money instead and invest it into housing. So we need to have a complete overhaul of our housing system. Virginia has one of the most landlord-friendly landlord-tenant laws in the country. And that's the reason why out of the 10 cities in America with the highest eviction rates, 5 of them are in Virginia. So we need rent control. We need good cause eviction laws, so you can't be kicked out of your home unless you've actually done something wrong. We need cooperative ownership of housing. We need massive investments in public housing. And we need to make sure that housing is no longer seen as a vehicle for the wealthy to make money, but as a means to provide for the human need for shelter. That is absolutely up to the General Assembly to change, and I have been fighting for that change for the last 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Ms. Maldonado.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. What I will say is I've lived in rent-controlled housing. Before I moved here in '93, my husband and I lived in the South Bronx. And rent-controlled housing doesn't always answer the questions. There's a lot of things that happen in rent-controlled housing where people don't have adequate care and facility. Things aren't properly working. They aren't tended to because there is not enough of an incentive for the landlord or property owner to be doing the work they need to do. It also gives a lot of opportunity for people to use financial resources to bribe their way into rent-controlled housing. What we need to be able to do this is a couple of things. I'm not saying that rent-controlled housing can't be a solution, but we know from looking at over time what it ends up doing is creating issues around how many people get to actually be in them that need them. So we need to look at things like set-asides. So when new development comes up, because we are growing by leaps and bounds in this area because we are a commuter community as well as people who work here. So we need to be able, in these new developments, to have set-asides for a percentage of the properties, percentage of the housing to be for lower income families so that we can make a living, and not in ways that concentrate them in specific areas of the county, but that are integrated across all of where we are. The other thing that we need to do, and that's kind of scattered site housing.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zarita, the same question.
Thank you for that question, Madam Chairwoman. I was on the Section 8 housing when I came to Manassas. And I'll tell you, they had an incentive program that was from the federal government. And it was the best incentive program that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Coming from living not in a trailer park, but living in a low-income housing and being poor growing up, and continue to raise my children that way. When I got to Manassas, my life changed because the Virginia government offered an incentive for people that were in Section 8 housing. And what they did is they gave you incentives to go to school. There was a program that if you met these requirements, they gave you like 5 or 6 requirements. And when you were in these requirements, you were improving your lifestyle. You were getting counseling, you were getting all these things. But what they were doing was taking a percentage of your rent that you're paying into Section 8 housing and putting it aside for you to buy your own home. I mean, what better program that you can go through? And this is the program that I want to bring back because it has really dramatically changed my life. And that is, you go into this program, they set you up, they help you get the financial planning, they help you with mental health, getting you prepared for that new job that you're getting ready to work into. Job training. They offered so many incentives to help me get off my public assistance that I lived on all my life.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Thank you so much, Ms. Zarita.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Our second question. Equity in education has been an ongoing concern across the Commonwealth, and HD50 is impacted by the persisting equity gap. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this situation. What is your specific plan to implement policies to address this equity gap in education for students in HD50? Ms. Zarita, first.
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
What is your specific plan to implement policies to address the equity gap in education for students in HD50?
First and foremost, education. Education is very important right here in our 50th district. My kids went to public school. I believe what we need to do is find incentives for our teachers to pay our teacher better pay, get our schools where they're more funded by the state and the federal government. Just listening to our teachers, listening to our superintendents, going into those meetings to see what they exactly would like to see, and then bring that to Richmond to go ahead and fix the problems that are happening here on ground. Public education and bringing the vocational trainings back into our education. Not everyone, especially now, can afford college. So bringing the vocational training back, the plumbers, the nurses training, the LPN trainings, all of that need to start here. And when you do that, the kids come out of school and they have a plan in place with their counselors, and they're able to go into a high paying skilled job, and then they can worry about college as they're working if they decide to do so. So I think that bringing vocational training back into our schools is the best plan that we could ever invest in. I can't hear her.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Delegate Carter, the same question.
So one of the biggest issues that we have in education is the fact that so much of education is dependent on local property taxes for funding. And so we end up with localities that get this sort of downward spiral where they have a poor property tax base. And because they have a poor property tax base, they're unable to fund their schools adequately. Because they're unable to fund their schools adequately, the desire to live there is lower, and they end up with lower property values and a lower property tax base. So we've got to end that. And the way that we end that is by amending Virginia's Constitution. There are two words in particular that are causing a lot of problems. The words are seek to. In Virginia's Constitution, it says that the Commonwealth will seek to provide a high quality education for every student. If we amend the Constitution to get rid of those two words, it will say the Commonwealth of Virginia shall provide a high quality education for every student. That is an enforceable constitutional mandate for the General Assembly to act and to step in to backstop localities that are struggling. Now, as far as what I have done to help with this issue while we are fighting for that goal, this is a perfect example. I sit on the Finance Committee, and in 2019, the Republicans tried to create a tax exemption for what was called the GILTI tax. It was a tax for corporations that were caught hoarding their money overseas. They wanted to create a tax exemption for that. And I was the only one on the Finance Committee to vote no. I rallied support, and we ended up with tens of millions of extra money for the at-risk K-12.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Next up, Ms. Maldonado.
Hi, thank you for the question. As the daughter of educators coming from multiple generations of educators, this is a very near and dear question for me. I'm the mother of a teen son who attends public school in the county, who has special learning support needs in class. And there are several things that we need to do in this space. We need to create universal childcare and healthcare. We also need to tie that to paid sick and parental leave, not just for women, but also for men. We need the teacher base, the teacher salary. While I am celebrating and so grateful for the 5% increase, we know that these things are tied to SOQs, and all the other base funding is also related to SOLs. Those should not be how we determine how we compensate our teachers and how we fund our schools. Our children, our teachers, our administrators, and our community deserves better than that. We also need more counselors as opposed to SROs. We need more social workers. Currently, a lot of social workers don't have enough full-time work in one school, and they split their times across multiple schools without enough support. We need to do better there. As we do that, we create a stronger economic base, and we bring the opportunity to then tie it to jobs in the economy, because with a strong and educated base, we can have other professional opportunities, attract new business, which allows people to work and live in the same district, not have to work here because it's affordable, and travel and commute elsewhere. As delegate, I would make sure that these things come in place, and I would do it in a collaborative, continuous conversation fashion to bridge the
Your
gap.
time is up, Ms. Maldonado.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Our next question, and for this question, we will start with Ms. Maldonado. Do you support collective bargaining for public sector employees? How will you work with local elected officials to enact the new collective bargaining law?
Yes, thank you. And yes, I absolutely do. Part of the legislation that goes in House Bill 582 actually goes into effect today, May 1. And while it gives us choice and opportunity to be able to unionize and have that kind of support and representation, it does have a caveat, a kind of compromise of no strike. So when we have something like this, it really requires us to want to do this because the teeth isn't there. The teeth aren't there for it. So one of the things that's really important, we can look across different communities where we need to have representation in this way. One thing we know is recently studies from 2019 from the Economic Policy Institute is that there is a decline in union membership that tracks an income inequality rise. So while it's not the only factor, it is certainly one of them. And we need these in things like teaching. So I have seen, all of us here have seen how teachers have not been adequately supported and compensated over the years. They're not the only ones. Fire, first responders, folks all over the place, as well as traditional and gig and other sort of vendor contracting economies. We need support, we need choice, and we need to be able to bring people to the table together to be able to make this an economy that works for everyone and that everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Next, Ms. Zarita, same question. Ms. Zarita, you're on mute.
Can you repeat that question? I'm having some difficulty with my Zoom. It's going off and on.
The question is, do you support collective bargaining for public sector employees? How will you work with local elected officials to enact the new collective bargaining law?
I do support all the collective stuff that is going on. Workforce is diverse and needs to be more inclusive. And I don't have all the answers to all these questions. I am not a politician. I'm just an advocate trying to move things, work with everyone across the aisle. So the only thing that I can say, collective bargaining units is something that I will support. I have been working along the lines of supporting them for a while. But like I said, I really don't have a complete answer to that question right now, and I will go deeper into that question, but not at this time. I apologize, but like I said, I don't have all the answers to all these questions perfectly, but I am learning as I go along. And policies in place, you have to be able to go across the aisles and make sure that everybody is involved in them and being very inclusive. And thank you for that question.
I'm sorry. Delegate Carter, same question.
Thank you so much. I am a huge supporter of the right to organize and collectively bargain. I'm proud to have voted for the bill that got us here, but we have a lot farther to go. The bill, or the law now, as it's gone into effect today, makes it optional for localities to allow collective bargaining. That has to be mandatory. Anyone who's ever been a union member knows that if management is deciding whether or not you have the right to organize, you don't have the right to organize. It's got to be mandatory. But also, beyond just the right to organize and collectively bargain, I have been the chief patron for the last 3 years of the bill to repeal right to work in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, this should be a settled issue. The people voted on it in 2016 and rejected putting right to work in the Constitution. It's part of the Democratic Party's platform nationally. It says right in the platform, right to work laws are wrong. The State Central Committee unanimously supports repealing right to work. Every single member, Democratic member of Virginia's congressional delegation to the U.S. House is a co-sponsor of the PRO Act, which would repeal right to work nationally. And yet, I still cannot get the bill to repeal right to work to a floor vote because there are holdouts in the General Assembly. So we need leadership that will continue to hold other members of the General Assembly accountable for when they are holding up progress for the people. Another bill that I've introduced for the last 3 years is to allow public sector workers, including teachers, the right to go on strike without retaliation. I actually had hundreds of people threaten to assassinate me over that bill in 2020 because the far extreme right wing got it in their heads.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Delegate Carter. Our next question, we'll start with you, actually, Delegate Carter. The question is, transportation is the largest contributor to unsustainable carbon dioxide emissions in Virginia, and in House District 50 in particular. How will you work to increase the use of active public transportation in Virginia and ensure the expeditious reduction of transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions and per capita vehicle miles of travel in House District 50?
Well, there's only two ways to deal with traffic. You either build more lanes, which is what we've been doing for the last 50 years that has gotten us into this mess, or you reduce people's vehicle miles traveled. And that's what I've been focusing on for my entire time in the House. I've been fighting to make sure that we expand VRE service. We have a massive increase in our passenger rail capacity that is coming across the horizon with the doubling of the Long Bridge, with additional service on the Manassas line, on the Fredericksburg line, additional service on the Northeast Regional, going down to Richmond and going down to Norfolk. We've recently expanded Amtrak service to Roanoke. I'm going to fight to continue expanding Amtrak service to more communities in the Commonwealth so that trains are going where people need them to go. But I've also been fighting to make sure that VRE has better service hours. So VRE is wonderful if you're going into DC in the morning and coming out in the evening. I've been fighting for more reverse direction service, for more after hours service, for more weekend service. And I have introduced budget amendments to reduce the fares so that people can actually afford to buy a train ticket. Ultimately, we need to make sure that we're getting cars off of the road, because we have to remember, you are never stuck in traffic, you are traffic. And if you can get where you're going without getting in a car, then you are not traffic for someone else.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Same question, Ms. Maldonado.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, I used to commute into DC. I used to commute into Loudoun, and we all know the pain of not just 66, 495, 95, but also 28. We've got to do better, and we are making really good strides, but there's more to be done. And when we think about what that looks like, we have to think about the fact that we are in the midst of a COVID recovery. Going back to work is not going to look like what it used to. People aren't purchasing or leasing real estate in the same ways for workspaces. So we're naturally looking at a more hybrid workforce that sort of is more distributed, some working from home, some working in spaces, and some back in the office. So what traffic will look like is going to really be connected directly to how our workforce starts to evolve in this space. What we want to do is evolve and reduce our carbon footprint. So I am in agreement that we need to be increasing the frequency of the lines, not just further south to us, but in between Manassas or Bristow and the district and points in between. And we also need to make sure that we are creating green mobility options. I was very excited as I was out talking this morning to folks at the farmers market that I passed a patch of road work that had a bike lane. We don't have enough of those. I've had the fortune to be able to travel in different places and see really creative options. I want to get in there and have those creative conversations and create options for us to reduce our carbon footprint and create an environment and transportation that go hand in hand.
Thank you, Mrs. Maldonado. Ms. Zarita, same question.
Yes, thank you for that question. We need to do an inclusive economy, meaning extending bus routes to our rural areas. Less cars are better, and we need to extend metro lines going into Prince William County. I've been talking to Delegate Guzman, and she's doing a really good job on the extending the blue line here into Prince William County, even though it costs millions of dollars to do that. But if we go back to the small businesses and get them more in line to bringing that line back into Prince William County, I believe that we could do it sooner than later. Finding incentives to get people onto these bus lines and into the trains and the VRE. I'm really excited to see all this. The cars go away and we just use public transportation as much as we can. And that means reaching the rural areas. Rural areas right now are suffering because as COVID-19 has struck us, the bus lines are no longer reaching out there. And if they did, they're not on the same schedule. So we need to bring that back. It's very important to our gas and our green space to be able to eliminate gases and going into our environment. So, I would just leave it at that. But I think that we're in a,
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Thank you, Ms. Zarita.
Thank you, Mrs. Zarita. Our next question. Which communities do you believe were most significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic? And what is your specific plan to provide relief to these communities if elected? Ms. Zarita?
Working on the front lines with these different communities has been a very big impact. And one of the the impacts are to the areas of the low income, especially the low income has been more impacted by COVID-19. And my plan for that was to bring relief immediately by providing food, providing resources, and getting them where I'm providing 65% of their income by providing the food that I'm supplying to them. And when I'm doing that, they're now being able to pay their rent. Then we go to the COVID-19 shots and getting the shots to those folks. They've been the low income areas have been impacted highly impacted, but I could also tell you that our senior citizens, our working classes have also been impacted because they're using up their lifelines, their savings account to be able to put food on their tables. My whole thing about re-ramping this is getting them back to work, working with our city and federal government and even our state government to find ways to get these people back to work and to make sure that they have food on their table and a roof over their heads. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Zarita. Next on that is Delegate Carter.
Well, the 50th District is a case study in the disparities on COVID-19. We know that the Black community and the Hispanic and Latino community have borne the brunt of this pandemic. And that is painfully obvious when you look at zip code level data. The COVID-19 case rate is much, much higher in 20110, the city of Manassas, than it is in 20136, Bristow. The test positivity rate is far higher. The hospitalization rate is far higher. And the death rate is far higher. And there are a lot of reasons for that are largely economic in nature. Folks in the Black community and in the Hispanic and Latino community are far more likely to be frontline workers. They are far more likely to live in higher density family environments with more people per home where the disease transmits much more easily. They are far less likely to be able to work from home. They are far less likely to have health insurance. So this has laid bare the fact that we truly need a healthcare system that doesn't just provide for access or affordability, but that really guarantees that everyone can see a doctor when they need to, period. I have been fighting for the last 4 years to make Virginia a leader in single-payer healthcare. I would prefer for the federal government to do it, but there is absolutely no reason why Virginia can't lead the way and shame the federal government.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Ms. Maldonado, the same question.
Thanks for the question. You know, I'm fond of saying that we're all weathering the same storm, but we're not all in boats that are equally equipped. And what that means is that, you know, COVID has impacted all of us, every single one of us. And while we like to focus on, hyper-focus on certain groups, the reality is that, yes, Blacks, Latinos have been disproportionately impacted, as have women. But we also have members of our Asian American community, our Muslim communities who are equally impacted and suffering. So we need a holistic and integrated approach to be able to bring everybody together so that the people who need the resources get the resources. People who need the access have the access. And it is up to people who have it to be able to provide it and pave the way for others. We have that honor, that privilege, and that obligation. So as delegate, I want to make sure that those inroads are created so that we start to stitch together the fabric of our district in ways that support people who haven't had a voice, who haven't had resources, and who have been unheard and unlistened to. This cannot continue because as a Commonwealth, in order for us to be competitive, these things actually boil down to something as simple as security, right? So think about our global and national security. If we don't have all these things in line, safe and secure, over time, this begins to cascade. These have natural effects in that, in our education, in our ability to create and attract jobs and companies to this space. So we have
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mrs. Maldonado. Our next question. Candidates often discuss issues of diversity and equity, but many do not specifically address the LGBTQ plus community. Briefly discuss efforts you have made to advocate for the LGBTQ plus community and at least one initiative you will work to implement should you be elected. Ms. Maldonado?
Thank you for this question. I love it. So I come from a family where every letter of that is represented in my family. And I grew up in a family that was integrated, had members of the LGBTQIA in my family. So it was normal for me. And when I came out into the world and realized that everybody else's family wasn't like that, I was naively surprised. So the things that have always been important to me is making sure, as I said, that everybody has a voice at the table. The one thing you won't see from me is a separate pillar around equity, inclusion, diversity, and belonging, because as I've mentioned, I believe those things are integrated in every single thing we do. So every platform issue has that lens that filters through. When we think about our brothers and sisters and children in this community, there's a lot of resource and support that needs to be done. There's a lot of dignity and respect that needs to be extended. And we need to also have shelter for folks. We need to have resources for people to protect against and shield against suicide and depression and things that happen at higher levels than in our cisgender or heterosexual communities. There is, as probably all of you know, there's a new advisory board that was established at the governor's level. And I would want to work with them to help implement legislature that becomes what I like to call practical, tangible results that we feel right here, at home here in the district, and working with community organizations who have been doing this work on the ground for years.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado.
Resources.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Ms. Zarita, the same question. You're on mute, Ms. Zarita.
Mute. Okay, sorry about that. As a progressive Democrat, I'm about bringing everyone into the process and making certain laws refer to anything LGBTQ or anything across the aisle. I have many friends that live in this diverse world, and I want to work with them to make sure that they get a seat at this table as well. I support any laws to protect them and bring their health care to them, because a lot of the things that are happening now across the aisle, they're not accessible to health care. They're not accessible to the same programs that I am. And I want to make sure that there is equality across the table for everyone. Everyone deserves the same chances I have or anyone else. And I want to work and make sure that they get the same grants. Like, there's a lot of programs out here right now, and they can't get the grants for their businesses to protect the same people that they are trying to provide services to. So I want to make sure that they're getting the same equality across the board, protecting education and making sure that their lives matter just as well as my life. No one should be discriminated against about how they live their life. And I want to make sure that the discrimination laws are tighter and making sure that everyone is protected, and making sure that the education.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Delegate Carter, same question.
We've made great strides in the last 4 years, in the last 2 years in particular, in this arena. So 4 years ago, this seat was held by an arch conservative who worked hand in hand with Bob Marshall to make sure that the LGBTQ community was discriminated against as much as possible. That is no longer the case. In the last 4 years, we have passed protections for the LGBTQ community against housing discrimination, against workplace discrimination, against hate crimes. We have abolished the gay and trans panic defense. We have made great, great strides. But the thing that I am focused on going forward is making sure that we're not just being reactive. A lot of these policies are very reactive. It's about making sure that there's some kind of recourse after you're discriminated against. What I'm focused on is making sure that there is not a situation where you have to hope that the person above you wants to discriminate against you, right? So I am focusing on making sure that we have employee-owned business as the dominant sector of our economy, so that everyone can work in an enterprise that they own, that they operate, and they don't have to just hope and pray that their boss has ill feelings against them based on who they are, who they love, or who they were born to be. I am fighting for real empowerment to make sure that Virginians of all stripes are truly in control of their own economic destiny.
Thank you, Delegate Carter.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Our next question. During the pandemic, as schools closed, many women opted to stay home to care for their school-aged children. This has eliminated the voices of many women from the workplace and opened our nation's eyes to the unfair wages of women and the high cost and inaccessibility of childcare. If elected, what plans do you have to help women get back into the workplace and support their families? Does this plan change when considering rural communities in Virginia? Delegate Carter.
So I have been fighting in the General Assembly for the last 4 years to make sure that we have universal childcare, universal pre-K, that we have guaranteed family and sick leave. These are things that have largely stalled in the state Senate. And I am one of the most vocal members of the General Assembly in sort of putting the Senate's feet to the fire and make sure that we get these policies. But when we rebuild from COVID, this touches on what I was talking about in the last question. When we rebuild from COVID, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we own and that we operate. That is the way to truly get rid of economic disparities in this Commonwealth. These policies that are reactive and that address after the fact, providing recourse for people who have been discriminated against, in this case on the basis of sex, they are much better than not having them. But what's better than that is making sure that there is nobody that has the power to discriminate against you in the first place, right? So the cornerstone of my economic development philosophy is making sure that employee-owned business is central in our economy, so that people can have control over their own workplace and not just have to hope that they don't get a boss that wants to discriminate against them.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Ms. Maldonado, same question.
As a woman who has lived this, who has experienced this in the workplace, and as someone who now is a small business owner, I can understand both sides and both experiences of this. There are far too long have we witnessed women doing twice the work for half the pay. When we look across, break that down into cultural segments or racial groups, the disparities get even larger. And even though we look at different racial groups, there are subgroups within them that have great disparity as well. So it is time to create a sustainable way to create parity in pay. It also will help us be able to bring women back into the workplace, because many times the calculation is it's not enough money to offset childcare. So I'll stay makes that choice. We need to have, I agree with Delegate Carter, we need to have universal childcare, universal healthcare, and we need to have paid parental and sick leave, not just for the women, but for the men. Plenty of fathers want to be good fathers and are good fathers and are somehow discounted as equal parenting partners. My husband fought at his job when our son was born because there was no leave for men, and now they have it at that company. I think that we have to do these in order to make our economy work for everyone. As a small business owner, I enjoy being able to make decisions and being empowered about my own.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maldonado. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Ms. Zarita, the same question.
Yes, thank you for that question. I'll tell you, as a single mother, 15, raising my children, I had to juggle between work, taking care of my children, and daycare. And I've awfully wondered what I could do now to help these women that have stepped to stay home, get them back in the workforce. So one thing that we have to do, we have to find the incentives for them for their childcare. Childcare is the number one reason why a lot of these women are now walking away from the workforce. When you have an after-school program, like my friend Father Ramon's program, which I myself used when my children were in school, they shuttle the kids from the after-school program to his program, and there they get a hot meal, they get home, they get their schoolwork done, and mom is able to finish her shift. Bringing the health care, the unpaid leave, we need to bring that and bring it and I agree that we need to bring it for men too, because there's a lot of single parenting men out here, and they are also deciding to stay home because they cannot afford their childcare. Investing in childcare, investing in after school programs like Father Ramon's program, where the parent themselves can go to work knowing that their child is going to be taken care of.
Thank you, Ms. Zarita. Thank you, Ms. Zarita.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zarita. And I want to thank all of our candidates. That brings the question portion of our forum to a close. I want to thank all of our candidates for your answers today and sharing your insights on your platform. At this time, we will move into closing statements. As a reminder, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for their closing statements. As I said earlier, the closing statements will go in reverse order. So we will start with Ms. Helen Zarita. Ms. Zarita, you're on mute.
I want to thank you all for having me here, but so much more. I want to thank the constituents that have offered me this chance to interview with them for a job that means so much. This is not a job that I take very lightly. It's a job that I take to heart. When you can combine, when you go for an office like this or a position like this, you're carrying the weight of so many lives on top of you, and they want to listen to you. They want you to listen to them. And being out here on the ground for the last year, I have listened to so much, and I have brought as much as I can to the constituents and helping them with their food, their shelter, and I know what I need to do. My movement has been growing across the 50th district. People are joining me. People are dedicating their time to help me get people back to where they were before COVID. Our world is never going to be the same as it was before COVID. We are now going into a new lifestyle, and we're all trying to adapt. And the best way that I know how to adapt is to go back into my own life as when I was on Section 8 housing, when I was in my coma and I came out of it, and I learned how to relive again. Going through COVID is like reliving. And when you start reliving your life, you take your life experiences and you start helping people. And that's exactly what I did. I am not a polished politician, but I'll tell you what, the women's rights, we need to bring education and bring so much more to that movement of women's rights. We're not talking about just funding abortions, and we're talking about education, bringing the money back to the women on all 4 fronts and getting them back into the workforce. And like I said, I'm not a polished politician.
Thank you.
But I am here to bring.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Zarita. Mrs. Michele Maldonado.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, today for listening and being with us. I believe in dignity and respect for everyone. I believe it's a privilege and an honor to serve the constituents of our district, and I believe it's an obligation and a commitment we make to be engaged in ongoing conversation and dialogue, all points along the way, so that we can be informed and we can co-create together and bring things to the state legislature. I want to be able to do that for our people so that we can improve the economy, so that we do that by working in improving conditions for women, for teachers, for all children, and for our constituents across the spectrum in cultural and racial communities. I also believe that I'm running on this platform of one community, one Commonwealth. It's not just a slogan, it's something that I truly believe, leveraging the strength and power from my work, My rags to riches story is not a rags to riches story. I am not wealthy and I'm not a politician either. But I don't think those are the gating items for what we're trying to do here. I think every person running in this race has a passion and a purpose about how they want to make a difference. And the way I can make a difference is by bringing the skill sets I have from the legal world, the business world, the education world, the mother world. Because all of us live those things, and I'm not reading about what's happening in our district, I'm living them. I can do that for us, and I will do that together because I think we can do anything together. I thank you for your time, and I wish my opponents good luck in their campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Maldonado. And lastly, Delegate Lee Carter.
Well, thank you again so much for being out here this afternoon. I, again, am Lee Carter. I've been the delegate for the 50th District for the last 4 years. And I want to leave you with a description of sort of my role in the Democratic caucus in the House of Delegates. So I've done two things primarily. The first is I am the tip of the spear on new issues. I focus my legislation on bills that nobody else wants to touch, but that are issues of justice. That's why I was out in the front of the fight to abolish the death penalty. I was out in front on the fight to legalize cannabis. I am now out on the front in the fight to repeal right to work and to overhaul our public safety system so that we don't have police enacting violence upon our communities in such large numbers in the future. And I am at the forefront of the fight to immediately end mass incarceration. And the second role that I serve in the House Democratic Caucus is as the conscience. We've done the hard work of getting rid of the Republican majority and building a Democratic one. But I am proud to say that I hold the Democratic majority's feet to the fire when it fails the people of Virginia and fails to live up to its promises. It hasn't made me many friends within the House Democratic Caucus, but you know that the results that we deliver are better for it. I opposed the Amazon deal. I opposed the casinos. I opposed delaying the minimum wage increase that went into effect today. It was supposed to have gone into effect on January 1st, but our Democratic majority delayed it for 5 months. We need someone in the House Democratic Caucus who will serve as that conscience, who will blow the whistle when the Democratic Party is not living up to its values. And I hope that I can continue to do that for the next 2 years. I'm the only Democrat who's ever won this seat. And I want to leave you with this thought right now. In the fight for justice,
Delegate Carter.
Why take a chance?
Thank you, Delegate Carter.
Thank you, Delegate Carter. Not only thank you to Delegate Carter, but I also want to thank Mrs. Michele Maldonado and Mrs. Helen Zarita. Thank you for all of our candidates for House District 50 for being with us, for patiently answering our questions and addressing the concerns of the